Hey team, today we're going to start long division, which is pretty awesome. It's one of my more favorite math topics to teach because the problems end up looking so cool. So, if you have a problem such as 128 divided by 8 equals, we don't know yet, there are a couple things you need to do first to solve this. Now, before we go any farther, I want to make sure we all understand what's really happening. So, for example, if I had 128 Pokemon cards, and I needed to divide them up between myself and 7 other friends, well, that'd be 8 people, I'd be dividing 128 into 8 groups, and then my answer would tell me how many cards were in each group. So, for example, the really long way to do this, or if I was actually using cards, I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stacks of Pokemon cards, and I'd keep dealing cards out into those stacks until I got to 128. But that's kind of a hard way to do it. So, the first thing we need to do to solve these problems is write them in a different way, because we can't really solve the problem with it written like this. It doesn't allow us to work with it very well. So, the first thing we're going to do is rewrite the problem like this. We're going to put the number that we're dividing, which is called our dividend, inside this symbol here. Looks kind of like a little two-sided house. And then we're going to put our divisor, or in other words, how many stacks of Pokemon cards we're making, right out in front, like that. Now, from there, we can actually solve this problem. Okay, we're back to 128 divided by 8. The first thing we have to do is know where to put our first digit. And to do that, when we're dividing, we of course divide first. That's the first step. So you have to ask yourself, can we divide 1 by 8? And the answer is no. If I have one finger and I try to divide my one finger into 8 pieces, it's going to be extremely painful. So we can't do that. So we have to move over and use a little bit more of the problem. So now I have to ask myself, can I divide 12 by 8? And the answer is yes. So 8 goes into 12 one time. Please notice that the answer to the division part of the problem goes up on top because that's going to be our answer. However, we know that 8 goes into 128 more than just once. So our next step is to multiply to find out what we have left. And we multiply the number we just put on top. That's what you always do when you multiply, is you use the number you just put on top, multiply it by your divisor, the number out in front, and we know that 1 times 8 is 8. Now, before I go ahead, I'm actually going to draw a line between the 12 and the 8 of this problem, just to keep my work straight. Now, the next step is to subtract. 8 does not go into 12 once evenly, right? There's one group of 8 in 12, but we have some things left over, so we have to subtract. 12 minus 8 is 4. Our next step is to bring down. So whenever you bring down, you go to the next number that you haven't used yet, so we haven't used the 8 yet, and you bring it down into our problem, which gives us 48. The really tricky part of this that a lot of kids struggle with is knowing that DMSB is a cycle. It keeps going. So after you bring down, you go all the way back to the top and you divide again. But we now divide with this new number we have down here. So we now do 48 divided by 8, which is 6. You're always going to do it this way. You're going to bring down a number, and you'll have then a new number to divide. You'll always divide this new number by your divisor out front. After we divide, we multiply. And like I said earlier, you always multiply by the number you just put on top. So just the 6, not the whole 16. We just put the 6 up there. We'll divide that or multiply that by the 8, which gives us 48. After we multiply, we subtract. 48 minus 48, that's a tough one, is 0. and we just subtracted, so our next step is to bring down, but there's nothing left to bring down. There's also nothing down here, which means we have our answer. And our answer is that 8 goes into 128 16 times. Or in other words, if you had 128 Pokemon cards and you put them into 8 stacks, there would be 16 cards in each stack.